All right, so the Phoenicians is what we're on today. Yesterday, you should have learned about the Assyrians, and you should have learned about the Chaldeans or the new Babylonian Empire. But today, we're going to talk about the Phoenicians. Again, we are still working that learning target. I can identify how and why empires developed and how they affected people's lives. And if you can't tell by this, I'm going to go ahead and present. If you can't tell by this, the Phoenicians were boaters. They made this boat. They were excellent traders. And so we're going to talk more about that today. Again, master traders. Let's see if I can move my face out of the way again. Okay, so the thin strip of the coast along the eastern Mediterranean had many natural resources and good harbors. So again, we talked about this when we did our maps, that the Mediterranean kind of connected all of those ancient empires that kind of popped up along there. Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome, medieval Europe. Again, the Mesopotamia connects them all, or the Mesopotamia, the Mediterranean connects them all, and it becomes like a super highway. So along the Mediterranean, there were harbors at places that you could stop and trade with other people. And they had natural resources that might not have in certain areas. The resources and ports helped the development of industry and trade. By 1000 BC, independent city-states grew all along the Mediterranean. These people shared aspects of culture, including language and a trading economy. The most important thing you need to remember about trade is that not only do you trade physical objects that you would need, such as that copper and tin and wood, but you also trade things on how to do certain things. You trade religious ideas, you trade how-to achievements in technology, for example, writing, and you trade ideas on how to farm, like talking about the plow. This is how those things spread to us. This is why they didn't just die in Mesopotamia. This is why we know written language, and we know about plows and how to farm. It's because these people would meet with other people and they would trade those ideas. So those are all, trading is super important, not just for getting things, but also the spreading of ideas. This is an example of where people would trade, crossing over here. This is the I keep saying Mesopotamian. This is the Mediterranean that would hook up all of these civilizations. There's Greece there, Rome would be up here in Italy, and then Egypt here, and this would be Mesopotamia, so people could trade all along here with all the people. So the biggest thing that these people traded was purple dye. Purple dye, you ask, where did purple dye come from? Well, their name Phoenicians came from the ancient Greeks. They called these people Phoenicians because Phoenicians translates to purple dye people. They were obviously known for their purple dye. I'm going to move my face and hide that. Okay. The Phoenicians used local shellfish to make a purple dye, and they used that dye to dye fabric. So they could crush up that dye and use it to dye fabrics. They traded that dye as well as wood from their prized cedar trees. They exported wood to Egypt and Mesopotamia. From other lands, they imported raw materials. Raw materials are substance from which other things are made. So, for example, like for our shirts, I know we talked about this. A lot of your tags say made in China, made in Japan, but they not necessarily everything from your shirt came from that country. That's probably where it was put together. But raw materials such as the cotton to make your shirt, where did that come from? So sometimes to make a final product, you get things from all different places until it's finally made and shipped to where it's going. This is just an example. I'll move my face again of some of the shellfish they would use to make the purple dye. The purple became a symbol of royalty. In fact, if you look at many old movies or books or drawings of kings, they're always shown with some kind of purple on them, and it's because it was a prized possession to be able to own and dye your clothes purple back then. So to have it would have been a symbol of wealth. And there you go, some more trade routes that the Phoenicians would take. They were sailors. They could sail all along the Mediterranean Sea. The Phoenicians, to keep track of their trade, developed their own written language, and it was based on a 22-letter alphabet. They basically took cuneiform and then they adopted it from ancient Sumeria, for ancient Sumer. They took this cuneiform and they adapted it into their own 22 language alphabet. Each symbol from the Phoenician alphabet stood for a sound. That is really very much like ours today, isn't it? First, the ancient Greeks adopted the Phoenician alphabet. Later, the Romans changed it to form the basis of our modern Western alphabet. So, the great grandfather of our language is cuneiform. So, cuneiform was taken by these Phoenicians, adapted, changed a little bit, and we're going to look at that right now. And then it was eventually adapted to this Phoenician language. That Phoenician language was taken by Greek and Latin, which is what the Romans spoke, and eventually adopted into our modern alphabet. So you can see by this chart how it eventually became our alphabet. So there's O, looks very much the same. That's P, or no, actually that's R. There's R, looks a lot like P in the beginning, right? And it's flipped over and it becomes R. That's T, it's kind of like a little cross, becomes more like a T. That's M. It's very interesting. So our language does, in a very roundabout way, comes from cuneiform. And again, all written languages were first created to keep track of trade. So you could keep track of where you were sending things, what you were getting back. It was a way to keep track of wealth. We still have to keep track of those things today. Phoenician ships. That is an example of a Phoenician ship. It's very well crafted. They were skilled shipbuilders and sailors. They built strong ships that carried huge cargoes thousands of miles. So again, back in that map, when you saw them trading all along the different places in the Mediterranean, they had to have good ships that would be able to sail all of those miles because it's a long time. It looks small on the map, but it's really not. They had a square sail, as you can see in this picture. And they relied mostly on, sorry, that thing keeps popping up and then I can't read it. Let me hide that. Relied mostly on wind power. So these are oars in the water and they're pushing them forward, but also the wind is helping push them forward. The wind is going to take most of the work out, but they still use these oars to help move them forward, farther in the water. They became the first people to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. So again, the Atlantic Ocean goes between Europe and the Americas. And there's another example. This is actually from your textbook, so you can see what a ship inside would look like, cross section. There's storage in here, and that's them getting things packaged up so they can go trade it. And there's an example of some ships in a harbor in the Mediterranean where they would have traded. All right. The Persians, I'm just going to talk to you about. You don't really need to record anything, but I'm going to tell you really quick because the Persians, we will talk about the Persians again when we talk about ancient Greece and ancient Rome, mostly ancient Greece. They have the Persian Wars that we're going to talk about. So many years later, in the area of Mesopotamia, just a little bit east, is called Persia. By 700 BC, the people called the Medes ruled Persia. And by 550, King Cyrus led an uprising against Medes and won. That is Cyrus. There he is again. He was very peaceful under his rule. All of the people of Mesopotamia enjoyed 200 years of peace and a strong economy. And by this time, it wasn't called Mesopotamia anymore. It was called Persia. The secret to his success was tolerance. Again, he was sympathetic for the beliefs and practices of others. He let them continue to do what it is that made them happy. Believe what you want to believe. Keep your religion, your traditions, and that kind of thing makes people happy. After winning wars, he showed mercy to conquered kings by letting them keep their throne, which would again help keep power. He demanded only a tribute. And a lot of this is like Sargon. Sargon was the same way. He demanded only a tribute that they could afford and honored their local customs. That earned him respect and acceptance. Again, some more pictures of Cyrus. Later on, a king named Darius started to rule. I went a little bit too far. I'm back up a little bit. King Darius ruled Persia at its height. He made the empire even bigger. It stretched from India, which we're going to talk about in a few units, all the way to southeastern Europe and the West. He was a very wise ruler, and he avoided problems that made other empires weak. What that means is he basically took the land and divided it into what's called provinces. They're like little chunks of land. Think of the United States divided up into states. Same thing. So he took his land, divided it into provinces. Each province was an administrative district of a province is administrative district of a larger empire. That province was run by what's called a satrap. A satrap is like a governor. So think of our 50 states. We have in each one of our states, we have a governor that runs our state. So our governor is Governor Parsons, and he runs our state. And each one of our states have a governor, and those governors all meet with the president. So they all kind of work together. And that's how you keep control of your empire. You've got to have people that are in control of little chunks of land, and they can report to a higher people. But all in all, you've got to have a person running smaller pieces of land because it's way too much work for one person to do when it gets so big. And that's an example, by the way, I went too far, but that's an example of all the little lands in his empire. And that's what it is today. The satraps helped Darius control the large empire. He introduced taxes and he fixed each province's tributes, only half of what they could afford to pay. He also introduced a standardized currency. Very first time money was used, which made it easier to pay taxes and buy goods. So they didn't have to pay in food or goods anymore. They could pay in money. He built the 1,500-mile royal road, which is helping him communicate. Again, that's the royal highway. Other roads connected all 20 provinces, so messengers could carry his orders anywhere in under 15 days. The roads helped unify the different people and cultures of the empire. Darius also built a new capital called Persepolis, which had beautiful palaces and statues. This is an example of what's left of Persepolis today. This was the largest, most stable, and powerful empire of Mesopotamia. All right, and that's where we're going to stop today. So, like I said, I'm not going to make you take notes on Persia just because it's not super important. I just wanted you to know the background so when we get to Greece and Rome, we know a little bit about Darius because it's going to touch on Darius until it gets to Xerxes and the Peloponnesian War. So let's move to our notebook. So what you need to do is answer these questions. What did they make for trade? They made purple dye. How did they make it? By crushing shellfish. What helped keep track of trade? A 22-letter alphabet. Why is it special? It is the basis for our alphabet. What else were they skilled at? Shipbuilding. What were they the first to do? Sail across the Atlantic. And what did they spread through trade? Ideas such as ideas and religion and culture, basically, is what you need to know. They spread ideas, technological ideas, they spread religion, and they spread culture, which eventually leads to other places, which is why we are learning about Mesopotamia today. And we're really going to focus on why are we learning about Mesopotamia in our last lesson when we talk about the achievements and the legacy of Mesopotamia. All right, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you soon.